She became a surrogate for a millionaire CEO, but his reaction after learning her secret left her speechless. Not yet. His palm rested over the form like a brake on a rolling car. You don't get to sign that today. She stiffened. Whose body is this meant to protect? Mine or your company's? The part that turns you into a dataset. His voice didn't rise. It thickened, like rain gathering on glass. I'm informed. Informed consent under pressure is still pressure. She met his eyes and didn't blink. I didn't come here for a lecture. I came here to work. Then let me remove the trap. He slid the paper toward himself and tapped the paragraph she hadn't read yet. The clinic shares your information with a third-party analytics firm. We don't do this. Not with you. You own them. I did. I'm done. Because of me. Because of dignity. A breath she didn't realize she was holding loosened in her chest. Stay with me, he said quietly. I'm about to do something I should have done a long time ago. What's that? Act like your body isn't a bargain chip. If stories about dignity over dollars resonate with you, the narrator murmured, gentle but urgent, tap like and comment, dignity, so this reaches someone who needs it. The clinic lobby sounded like money trying to be quiet. Water whispering down a glass wall. Air that didn't smell like people. Orchids arranged as if a hand had ironed every petal. She'd gotten there early the way bus people are always early, as if time can be a form of respect. Her blazer was thrifted. The pocket was stitched where it had ripped. The stitches were small and stubborn. She was small and stubborn. It fit. On the tablet she wrote her name in letters she'd practiced since childhood. Letters that said I will not ask twice. The receptionist's careful smile softened when she joked about buses. Polite turned human. She sat beneath a screen playing stock footage about modern families. Hands folding over round bellies. Wedding bands catching soft focus light. Her hands held no ring. Only two clean scars. One along the thumb from a corrugated tin door that had taught her what wine could do when it chose to be cruel. One at the wrist from an espresso machine that hissed like something that wanted to bite. A door side open. We're ready for you. The consultation room was cream and chrome. Minimalist. Intentional. A desk between two chairs like a border drawn by someone who thought borders were tidy. The doctor had the kind of calm eyes you only get by seeing too much and not breaking. The man across from her wore a charcoal suit without a tie. Sleeves pushed up to the forearms as if he had planned to wash his hands and forgot. He wasn't movie star handsome. He wasn't trying. His stillness did the work. Thank you for coming, the doctor said. This is. I know who he is, she said. It came out before she could stop it. The city had his name folded into its skyline. Not because he built towers. Because he wrote the software that decided who got to stand inside them. He stood as if asking permission from the air. May I? Sit, she said. We can be people here. I appreciate your time, he said. If anything feels rushed or unclear, we stop. No charm. Just gravel smoothed by rain. The doctor began the dance of terms and steps. Medical screenings. Counseling. Legal frameworks. Words like gestational and embryo viability and chain of custody slipped into the room like they belonged more than she did. She sat straight. Hands still. This wasn't charity or romance. This was arithmetic. A ledger she had been balancing for years with numbers that never behaved. When the addendum appeared, it looked ordinary. Paper with a paragraph shaped like it had earned its place. The doctor slid the folder across the desk. There's a standard questionnaire and a small add-on. If you'll initial here. She reached for the pen. His hand covered the page. Not yet. The doctor paused. Hers was the face of someone who has learned to let silence land before asking it to explain itself. "I'll give you a minute," she said, and left. He didn't snatch the folder. He turned it. "Read the addendum." The set of his jaw changed. Not anger. Reckoning. He pushed it back so she could see. He tapped the small paragraph. "Did they tell you this part gets shared?" She read 3 lines and tasted metal. "I know what it is. And you're comfortable with it." "No one's comfortable with being turned into a scatterplot," she said flatly. "I'm informed." Informed can still mean cornered. If this is the part where you worry I'm complicated, save it. I came to work. I read what I sign. I'm deciding whether I can live with what I asked for, he said. You asked for a child. Not my data set. He almost smiled. Not with his mouth. With a quiet in his shoulders. May I ask you something personal? You already did. Why did you choose this? Because the ledger in my head never balances, she said. And this is the only number big enough to move the sum. What's on it? A name. She said her brother's name, and the room listened. The stairwell light that never worked. The missing screw in the rail the size of a thumbnail. A fall. A hospital waiting room with wax on the floor and cold coffee in hands that couldn't stop trembling. A settlement thin as a prayer and a wheelchair that laughed at stairs until a neighbor sold it for parts. The landlord said the city. The city said the landlord. Everyone said later. She paid legal fees like other people buy furniture, in portions that made dignity feel like something on layaway. He asked for the name again and repeated it back to her, careful as if language were glass. He unlocked his phone. An org chart appeared. An acquisition date. Boxes inside the shadow of a larger box. The parent company sits under my analytics arm, he said. We didn't own it then. We do now. If you're about to offer a private fix, don't. I don't need a miracle. I need a precedent. Good, he said. I don't believe in miracles that don't scale. The addendum was struck through when the doctor returned. The pen hissed across the paper like a small animal that had decided to be obedient. We'll proceed without data sharing, he said. And my company's recused from anything touching your case by morning. You can do that. I can refuse a conflict of interest, he said. Influence is a conflict when strangers pay for it. They didn't shake on it. They breathed. The desk, a border a minute ago, became a table again. The doctor explained timelines. Hormones. Calendars that would soon look like someone had tried to pin the moon to the wall. On the day a small anomaly appeared in her blood work, the clinic called it inconclusive. She called it a cliff built out of waiting. He arrived without an entourage carrying 2 coffees and a paper bag that smelled like good bread. He didn't sit too close. He didn't pretend fluorescent lights made anyone less tired. You didn't need to come, she said. I know, he answered. But I didn't want you to sit here pretending you weren't afraid. I'm not. Then I'll pretend with you. They talked about unimportant joys the way exhausted people do when they're trying to keep the world from shrinking. The cafe on 12th that made an almond croissant sticky with a memory. The subway car that grew quiet between Juniper and Maine like the whole city was holding its breath. Pigeons that act like they paid rent. He laughed once, soft, surprised by himself. It sounded ordinary. The ordinary sound good men make when they stop editing themselves. The doctor returned. Lab error, she said, smiling with the kind of relief that doesn't overpromise. You can proceed. Relief flapped the calendar like wind in a room with no windows. There's one more thing, the doctor added. Your intake shows no under prior pregnancies, which matches your medical records. But it also shows yes under prior gestational losses. Did you check that by mistake? She swallowed. I must have misread. We can correct it privately. I said it's a mistake. The doctor nodded. We'll amend. When the door closed again, he didn't look at her. He looked at the window like someone reading a city for answers. Some forms make space for truths people aren't ready to say out loud, he murmured. Some people decide what you meant because it suits the story they want, she replied. You're not on trial. Everyone who can't afford to be here is always on trial. He nodded once. Not a retreat. A concession. If I ask something and you want to leave, say the word and I won't follow. Ask. Was it a mistake? The room emptied of furniture and filled with memory. She sat. The past sat with her. 5 years ago, she said, voice level, I agreed to carry for a couple from out of state. Agency ad in the back of a weekly paper. Legal support promised. Counseling promised. A calendar with injections was the only thing that arrived on time. At 12 weeks she bled. The agency line rang into forever. The ER did what it could. The clinic refused records without the intended parents' permission. The parents vanished. The agency dissolved. The address was a P.O. box. I didn't lose anything, she said. Loss means you might find it again. It was taken, and then they erased the taking. He stood. Opened the door. Told the doctor he needed a minute. Closed the door. His face had the look of someone walking into a room where apology belongs to action, not words. I can't ask you to do this for me, he said softly. Not with that weight on your back. I won't be another door that won't open when you knock. You think I'm fragile. I think you're owed. For what? For someone refusing to turn your body into a line item. For someone who doesn't pretend choice cancels harm. And if I say I want to proceed because not all roads to dignity are gentle. Then we proceed. On your terms. But not under silence. What does that mean? We put your story on the page. Names redacted if you want. A sentence. A footnote. Something that refuses erasure. Who needs to read it? Me, he said. First and last. So I never forget what I asked you to carry. Her throat tightened. She didn't cry. She had learned not to. But one breath blurred the corners of the room. Okay. If you've ever felt powerless in a system and still chose to speak, the narrator said, drop I see you in the comments. Your story could be the map someone else needs. The injections began. The kitchen chair was their waiting room. Alcohol swab. Pinch. Press. Breathe. She did not perform courage. She did the task. He sat, sleeves pushed, eyes steady, learning the shape of a quiet he could keep. He didn't watch like a savior. He watched like he might need to tell this map to someone who would one day ask him how to be gentle. He started ending things at work. The board saw penalties and called them costs. He saw penalties and called them tuition. He unwound data-sharing contracts attached to reproductive medicine. He declined to rebrand it as philanthropy. He rejected the press release that wanted to make him the hero of a harm he had only just learned to name. Why do you want a child? She asked one evening, eyes on a saucepan that had seen better days. One sentence. He considered. He didn't rush. Because I'm tired of building things whose only purpose is to survive me. Good sentence, she said. Your turn. What for? Why are you doing this? For the legal fund, she replied. For my brother. For an apartment door that doesn't swell when it rains. And because I want to do something with my body that isn't defending it. He nodded like he was taking an oath he didn't have the right to speak aloud. Transfer day arrived like a small holiday in a country only the two of them knew. Paper gown. Socks that refused to stay up. A monitor pushing quiet stars across dark space. The embryologist spoke in gentle plurals. The doctor's voice made everything feel like a step, not a cliff. He stood by her shoulder. He didn't touch until she turned her palm up. Then his hand found hers. A handle you could grip if the room tilted. A white flash paused on the screen like a star waiting for permission. "Breathe," the nurse whispered. She did. The star moved. Settled. Stayed. They didn't cheer. They agreed to hope without a microphone. If you've ever seen a small, impossible thing choose to stay, you know that quiet. It doesn't need your noise. It needs your care. Days learned to stretch and snap back. The city sharpened. Then softened. She measured time in appointments and in the days her brother could come with her when pain had manners. The recliner they bought secondhand groaned like an old friend. He didn't hover. He listened. When he said we, she corrected him, and he thanked her for the correction. He sat in the back of a courtroom once while the paralegal who had been fighting from the beginning made a sentence slice through the room like a clean blade. At 24 weeks the ultrasound technician went quiet. Too long. The sound of too long is a kind of cold that climbs. The doctor came in with those calm eyes and spoke with the careful body language of someone carrying glass. "Placental flow is a concern," she said. "It may resolve. If it doesn't, we manage. If we can't manage, we deliver early." The room hummed the way bright rooms do when people are deciding how to be brave. In the park beneath a tree that kept being beautiful even when nobody deserved it, they sat on a bench and looked at the ground so the sky wouldn't make promises. "If this goes badly," she said, "I don't want to be a headline." "You won't be. If it goes well, I don't want to be a myth." "You won't be that either." "What will I be, then?" "A person who did something impossible and demanded it be treated as ordinary." She laughed once. The laugh of someone whose body remembered joy before her mind did. "Careful. You're starting to believe in me. I started the day you corrected me at that desk." "Tell me a story," she said after a long time. "Your first memory of dignity." He rubbed a thumb against his palm like the memory was a coin he hadn't touched in years. "I was 9, he said. My mother cleaned the lobby of an office where men practiced owning other men. A partner tossed a wad of paper at the bin and missed. He looked at me like furniture with hands. My mother stepped between us. She bent, picked up the paper. And then she missed the bin on purpose. She left it there. Finished polishing. Took my hand. No speech. Just a lesson. His mess wasn't our job. "I like her," she said. "She'd like you," he said. "Careful," she whispered, smiling without needing to. "You're introducing me to people I haven't met." "I'll schedule it," he replied, deadpan. She shook her head. It looked like yes. 32 weeks. The room filled with people who know how to move fast without making fear contagious. Lights were bright but not cruel. Voices steady. The baby came out purple and furious that the terms of existence included cold air. Everyone called that a very good sign. She cried one short, automatic cry and then her body decided to get back to the business of staying. The baby went to the NICU where little lives glow behind small portholes. He went there too and put his hand on the incubator like a pilgrim who doesn't know the liturgy but knows how to mean things. "Hello," he said. "We've been waiting for you." A nurse looked up. "Are you the father?" He considered the truth. "I'm the one who asked for him." She nodded. "Sometimes that's enough." Upstairs, he sat by her window with his coat on his knees like a schoolboy afraid to spill. "Can I?" he began. He gestured at the space between them the way careful men do when they've learned permission is a real word. "You can sit," she said. "Talking costs extra." He grinned. "I can afford it. Don't get cute." I'm failing anyway. How is he? She asked. Stubborn. Hungry. Offended by blankets. Good. They rode the elevator back down later and walked the clean hall that smelled like lemon and resolve. At the NICU, she reached in. The baby's foot was the size of a thumbprint. She touched it. Something unspooled inside her. Not love. Not relief. Something like the ledger moving one line closer to balanced. She didn't look at him when she spoke. She didn't need to. You're going to grow in a world that knows your name without making it a brand, she whispered to the child who wasn't hers. The monitors listened without arguing. Weeks turned into a kind of work. She healed. He learned the schedules. He learned that hope sets its own alarms. He learned that the most expensive thing in any hospital is the moment you realize everyone here is trying their absolute best. Ordinary heroism isn't pretty. It is efficient. It is hands washed, again and again and again. The day the baby's alarms went quiet because nothing was wrong enough to need noise, the room felt wider. They did not celebrate loud. They thanked the nurse who had the handwriting of a person who takes notes like promises. He stood in the foyer and looked at her like a question he was ready to ask when the time was right. He didn't ask it. He leaned forward instead and placed a kiss against her jaw that felt like someone honoring a treaty. She did not step back. She didn't step forward either. Rests matter as much as notes. If you've witnessed a moment where someone chose respect over spectacle, share one line about it in the comments. Stories teach us how to act. The court date came 3 months later. He didn't sit in the front. He didn't sit with her. He sat near her brother at the community center down the block where the televisions were old and the chairs squeaked. He learned how to fix a wheel lock on a 5-year-old chair nobody services anymore. When the text came, it was 2 words. We won. He didn't send confetti. He rolled the chair 3 feet. The brakes engaged with new confidence. Try it now, he said. Her brother tried. Stopped. Grinned. The kind of grin that makes a room look like a better room. Now it's good, he said. The written opinion used a phrase that made her want to frame it even though framing felt like something people do in houses with more wall than bills. Habitability as dignity. She read it twice. Then a 3rd time. Then she folded it and put it in the pocket of the blazer with the small stubborn stitches and felt bigger inside her clothes. On Sundays they sat on her stoop with paper cups of coffee going cool. Kids drew constellations on the sidewalk in chalk that stained their knees like small badges. On Tuesdays he worked from a plastic table at the library because the Wi-Fi was honest and the chairs complained. Fridays were for tired laughter that made the week feel like it had chosen the right people to carry it. Once he said we in a sentence that belonged to her and she raised an eyebrow and he said, thank you, and started again like a man who had learned the grammar of respect. They didn't define anything. They didn't need to. Affection can be a practice. Showing up with groceries and leaving before dinner. Listening without filing. Asking without taking. Kissing like a treaty. Rests where other people would put noise. The day the sign went up, the metal was matte so it wouldn't glare. The name wasn't his or hers. The Ordinary Dignity Project. The mission was a sentence plain enough to be hard. Designing systems that treat people like they're people. No ribbon cut. She took the scissors in both hands and then offered them to her brother and together they did what needed doing. Inside, a wall held the court decision printed on cheap paper because paper is how regular people make the world behave. Another wall offered a calendar of tenant meetings and wheelchair maintenance workshops and clinic privacy trainings taught by doctors who had learned the long way what not to say. In a corner, 2 chairs and a soft lamp made a place where new parents could sit without being required to define themselves on a form before being handed kindness. He watched from the back, sleeves rolled, work done. She spoke without a podium voice. People listened like they were being invited into a room that had always secretly been theirs. He filled 2 small paper cups at a water cooler that groaned and handed one to her as if it were a sacrament. "You still owe me for talking," she said. He patted his pockets. "All I have is time. Spend that. Every day. If respect should be ordinary, not rare, share this with one person who needs it and subscribe for more true-to-life stories. Let continues the journey as boundaries become music, stakes rise, and the moment arrives when someone finally says the sentence that changes not just a life, but a system." She didn't sleep much the week after the launch. Joy is noisy in the body even when the room is quiet. She kept seeing the matte sign in her head at odd hours. Kept hearing the soft click of scissors in her brother's hands. Kept feeling the weightless second after a ribbon falls and a thing becomes real. On Wednesday morning, she woke to rain that sounded like a city apologizing. She brewed coffee and leaned against the counter, face still, heartbeat loud. The doorbell rang. He stood there in a dark jacket, hair damp, no umbrella, like he'd chosen to be the kind of person who gets rained on. In his hands, a folder, not a gift. When he held a folder, it meant work had come to the house and wanted to be honest for once. "Too early?" he asked. "It's when buzz people are awake," she said, opening the door wider. "Come in." He shook rain onto the mat and set the folder on the table. He looked tired, not from sleep but from decisions. The kind of tired that means something finished but nothing ended. "The board didn't like the penalties," he said, matter of fact. "They liked the privacy stance less." "And what did you do?" "I reminded them our brand promise can't be, we did harm politely. I told them the short-term hit is tuition for being late to decency." Then one of them asked if we could frame our changes as innovation. "What did you say?" "I said we're not innovating, we're repenting." She laughed once, a quick flare. "How did that go?" He blinked like the word had never been spoken in a boardroom. "Probably hadn't," she said. He opened the folder. A single-page memo, dense with numbers. "I'm splitting the analytics arm," he said. "The segment that touches anything intimate, health, home, wages, education, goes into a benefit corporation with a charter we can enforce. The rest stays where it is with guardrails." "Guardrails are only useful if you don't drive drunk," she said. "Which is why the charter has teeth," he replied. "And why we're adding a public oversight council that includes people who have been on the wrong end of our decisions. People like me. People exactly like you. Only if you choose. No obligation. Put me on the list to be asked," she said. "I reserve the right to say no." "You always have that right," he said. "And I've learned to leave room for it." She poured coffee into 2 chipped cups whose chips had their own timeline. He didn't take notes. He didn't pitch. They stood in the kitchen like 2 people who remembered how small rooms can hold large choices. "If you've ever wanted leaders to stop selling apologies as innovation," the narrator said, low and clear, "drop enough in the comments. It matters what words we honor." In the afternoon, she met the paralegal at the community center to sort receipts and mark the court order with sticky flags for tenants who were going to challenge other landlords and needed a Rosetta Stone. The paralegal had a pen behind her ear and the smile of someone who had learned to celebrate small teeth inside big gears. "You see the section on timelines," the paralegal said, tapping the page like a drumbeat. 30 days to fix immediate hazards. 60 for structural. Fines accrue daily. No more infinite later. "Everyone should get that sentence on a poster," she said. "I'll make posters," the paralegal replied. "I know a print shop that still takes cash and gratitude." Her brother rolled in from the sidewalk with the confidence of a man who had made peace with his chair and then made friends with it. He had learned to joke about squeaks like they were old men clearing their throats and to talk about pain like weather, present, not personal. "Delivery," he said, hoisting a dented aluminum pan onto the table. "Leftover jollof from last night's victory lap." "Food is a legal strategy." "It is," the paralegal agreed. Keep spirits high between paragraphs. He spooned rice into paper bowls and kept going when she raised a brow. What? He asked with fake innocence. We do abundance in here. It's a rule. Spoken like a man who knows the price of hunger, she said. Outside, the rain rehearsed. Inside, a strategy tasted like tomatoes and thyme and the memory of flames. Later, in the office with the mat sign, she held a privacy training with a young doctor whose hands shook when he spoke about statistics because he knew what they could erase. She loved him for that. He didn't come to perform competence. He came to learn how to stop hiding cruelty behind math. What do we say when a patient asks where their data goes? He asked. Tell the truth, she said. If it goes anywhere beyond their care, ask first and mean it. If that consent is tied to access, it isn't consent. And if the hospital insists. Bring the insistence here, she said. We'll translate it into a language the city can argue with. He nodded, a student. I wish I'd learned this in school, he said. You did, she replied. They just called it something else and graded you for obedience. The doctor looked like someone putting down a heavy bag he forgot he was carrying. At night, she sat on the stoop. He appeared with 2 pastries in a paper bag and a notebook tucked under his arm like an instrument. The kids were gone now. The chalk constellations had survived 2 hours of rain and 3 hours of small feet. The sky was moody and undecided. Walk, he asked. Let me lock up, she said. They moved without touching. The block was a catalogue of lives that deserved a better cataloger. A woman in a robe watered plants like apology. 2 teenage boys argued about sneakers with the intensity of historians. A man with a guitar but no case wrote a melody the street tried to memorize. I need your eyes on something, he said, opening the notebook to a draft of the Benefit Corporation Charter. He'd written clauses in plain English beside the legalese, arrows connecting harm to remedy. She read. Stopped. Pointed. This says data can't be sold. Good. But it also needs a line that says it can't be traded for services. People don't always know when they're paying with themselves. He wrote the sentence as she spoke it. His handwriting was careful enough to be a promise. And this part, she continued, tapping a paragraph about audit trails. Add a requirement that any model used for decision-making be described in human language and tested for harm on a set of cases provided by an independent committee. You're writing governance for a future we can live with, he said. You're being dramatic, she said. I'm writing a receipt we can show when someone tries to change the price. He smiled and wrote her sentence word for word. If you've ever been asked to pay with your privacy, the narrator said, quiet but direct, share one line about how it felt. Your story might build the guardrail someone else needs. The next morning, a message waited for her in the clinic portal. A routine appointment. A routine scan. The phrase routine lives beside the word fragile. She touched the screen like it might touch back and exhaled into the day. He met her at the bus stop without asking what time the bus came. He had learned not to ask certain questions. He had learned to be present in small increments that mattered more than large gestures. You look like you slept, he said. I did, she replied. Joy is noisy but it eventually tires itself out. Joy needs naps, he said. It does. In the waiting room, a new video played. Fewer wedding bands. More hands that were unpaired but decisive. She noticed. He noticed her noticing. Neither of them said so. You learn to savor small changes without demanding a parade. The technician began the scan. The room went dim. The screen lit the air in a way that always made hope appear like a religious object even when nobody believed that way. The technician didn't go quiet. She narrated. The narration was the kindness. Measurements. Placental flow. Good. No alarms. Also good. How are you feeling? the doctor asked afterward. Like a person being watched by machines that have decided to be kind, she said. That's unusually poetic, the doctor replied, half smiling. It's accurate, she said. He drove her home. He never said he would. He never assumed. He simply asked which route and then took it. They passed a billboard that used to advertise a company he owned. It was blank now. Not because he'd run out of money. Because some silences should be public. Lunch, he asked. Leftover jollof, she said. It's a strategy. Food as legal theory, he replied. I'm a convert. Her phone buzzed before they turned onto her block. A number she didn't know. She let it ring into nothing. It rang again. She answered with the flat hello of people who have run out of time for polite performances. Is this, a voice began, naming her with the old agency's file pronunciation. Who's asking? We're reaching out on behalf of a journalism outlet. We're investigating historic closures of reproductive agencies and the fates of records. We believe you may have been affected. We're asking if you'd share your experience on background. She listened to the hum behind the voice. Not tabloid. Not fishing. A woman who sounded like she knew how to hold other people's pain without squeezing. Why me, she asked. Because the clinic you went to shared a roster with an agency that dissolved, the journalist said. And because you left a paper trail they can't bury. We cross-referenced court filings. Your case against the property company intersected with their real estate arm. There's a story here about how harm clusters. She glanced at him. He kept his eyes on the road but his knuckles whitened. He didn't speak. He knew the rule. Her decisions about her story belonged to her. I don't want to be a headline, she said. You won't be, the journalist said. We're writing policy, not tragedy. You would be anonymous unless you choose otherwise. But your details could change how records are handled. What exactly would you need? Timeline. What you were told. How records were withheld. And what dignity would have looked like. Call me tomorrow, she said. Same time. She hung up and felt the old chill move through her body like a draft in a building with too many costs and not enough maintenance. She rubbed her thumb over the scar near her wrist. You don't owe anyone your pain, he said. I know, she replied. But I owe people a map. Then I'll drive, he said. The next day, she met the journalist in a park she trusted. The reporter brought a small recorder, a notebook, and a thermos. She offered tea. The gesture mattered more than the drink. I won't ask you to retell what hurts if it isn't helpful, the reporter said. We're trying to establish patterns. The fact that records were withheld because a contract framed your body as someone else's property is the point. That is the point, she said. What would dignity have looked like? A simple sentence in the contract, she said. No records can be withheld from the person whose body they describe. Another sentence. Any clinic that participates must keep a redundant copy of medical records accessible to the gestational carrier regardless of the status of the intended parents. The reporter wrote while nodding. What else? A hotline that isn't a voicemail box, she said. And fines that accrue for every day a record is withheld. Names, the reporter asked softly. Redacted, she said. You can have dates. You can have places. You can have the words I wrote in my own diary because nobody else would write them for me. Thank you, the reporter said. You're building a bill, you know. I'm writing a receipt. When the piece ran 2 weeks later, it didn't splash. It landed. Policy recommendations, drafted with language stolen from her sentences, threaded through the arguments. A councilwoman lifted it up in a committee and called it boring in the best way. Boring means it can pass. Boring means the room understands it. Boring is how change sneaks into law. He read it at his desk, sleeves rolled, the city outside pretending schedules can erase grief. He texted her a link with no preface. She replied with a single period, which in their language meant yes. If you've ever turned your hurt into a rule that protects someone else, the narrator said, gentle, share just one word here. It might be the most powerful word we read today. Summer arrived with heat that made the block smell like bread and exhaust and tomatoes on a windowsill. The baby grew into a person who disliked hats and loved the sound of crinkling paper. He visited the office in a sling on his father's chest, sleeping with the trust of a creature whose needs had learned a dependable schedule. She held him once, just long enough to remind herself that affection doesn't need ownership to be real. He grabbed her finger with the strength of a person who had decided Earth was acceptable. She laughed and handed him back like a delicate tool. His company's split finalized with less fanfare than skeptics predicted. Some investors grumbled. Others applauded. A few called him privately to say the quiet thing out loud. "You're making us all look bad," one said, half joking. "I'm making you look like you have a choice," he replied. "You won't be invited to certain rooms," another warned. "I'm building other rooms," he said. And propping their doors open. One evening, he stopped by her office with a box full of old plaques he had removed from hallways that made the air feel expensive. He set them on the floor like lumps of dull metal. He looked up, suddenly uncertain. "Does this read as theater?" he asked. "I don't want to perform change. I want to clean up." "Scrap metal can become chairs," she said. "Let the community center melt the names into something people can sit on." He grinned, the unguarded one, like a boy whose first science fair project had worked. They organized a Saturday event at the center. Kids stared at the blowtorch like a dragon you could trust. A welder with a firm jaw and a soft laugh helped bolt new legs onto old wood. The paralegal collected the screws in a jar and labeled it, accountability. Her brother gave a workshop in the corner on how to maintain will locks for chair models manufacturers pretend never existed. He had drawn diagrams on poster board with markers that bled through. People took pictures like the diagrams were gospel. Someone said it out loud. "This is holy," a woman whispered, wiping her eyes. "Because it works." He moved through the room carrying bolts and water cups and a conviction that legacy is a noun only if it behaves like a verb. He paused beside her. "Do you ever wish we had done less?" he asked. "No," she said. "I wish systems did more so people could do less." He nodded, chastened. "Then we keep going." "We do." Midweek, a letter arrived from the agency that had once eaten her life and vanished. Not from the agency itself, they were gone, folded into the dark of unaccountable dissolutions, but from a trustee overseeing the legal remains. The letter was brittle with apologies and full of logistical absolutions. They wrote about the impossibility of reconstructing records. They wrote about how sorry they were to be unable to locate certain files. The letter tried to end itself with regret as punctuation. She handed it to him in the park. He scanned it. His jaw tightened. He gave it back like it was something he refused to hold for her. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "Nothing," she said. "They can't give me what they took. But they can help someone else. We'll mail them our draft bill. We'll make them testify that their systems made theft possible." "Tell me where to be," he said. "Behind," she replied. "In the back row. If they speak to me, you let me answer. Always." The hearing was the kind of bureaucratic theater that empties the soul if you let it. But she didn't. She wore the stitched blazer and the small stubborn stitches looked like troops. She spoke in sentences that did not tremble. She said 14 things and each was a hammer. The trustee tried to wrap failure in passive voice and she unwrapped it with verbs that sat upright. "Records were withheld from the person whose body produced them," she said. "Hospitals treated consent as a contract seasonal workers couldn't understand. Agencies dissolved without redundancy plans. The bill you are considering would make the next me unnecessary. Do you want damages? A councilman asked, almost gentle. I want rules, she said. I can take care of the rest. He watched from the back row, a man holding his own hands to keep them from trying to interfere. He loved how she said rules like a gift instead of a punishment. He loved that his desire to protect had learned to stay in the correct seat. After, in the hallway that smelled like government and floor polish, she leaned against the cool wall and let fatigue wrap her bones the way good blankets do. He waited. She pushed off the wall and stood straight. That was clean, he said. It was necessary, she replied. You were astonishing, he said. You're biased. I am, he said. And I'm right. She snorted, the sound of someone unwilling to grant easy victories. But she didn't argue. If this helped, the narrator said, voice quiet and sincere, share one moment you witnessed an ordinary person make a system move. And subscribe if you want more stories that teach by telling the truth. Bankers call certain weeks quiet. They're wrong. Quiet weeks hold small fights that save you from large wars. She spent one quiet week meeting 3 tenants in a building where a landlord had learned to call mold humidity. She taught them the difference between an apology and a plan. She held a flashlight to take pictures beneath a sink where the wall had become a garden of the wrong color. She explained the new finds like a bedtime story. They smiled the cautious smiles of people who had read fairy tales that ended badly and were hungry for a version they could act in. He spent the same week rewriting vendor contracts to strip out surveillance language that had crept in like mold. He dropped clauses into the trash with the same satisfaction a mechanic feels when a bad part hits the floor and the machine sighs with relief. He recorded a video for his employees, just his face, no lighting tricks, sleeves rolled like always. I want you to hear this from me, he said. We're not maximizing. We're practicing. Profit is a tool. It's not our oath. Our oath is to treat people like they're people. If that sentence makes you roll your eyes, you will be happier elsewhere. He hit send and closed his laptop like a confession. He stood, stretched, and walked to the library, where a teenager needed help with a spreadsheet for a summer job. He sat and did the formulas and let the kid think he had done them himself because confidence builds unlike any line item. On Friday, they ate on her stoop again. The chalk constellations had faded into pastel ghosts. A child had added a spaceship without permission and everyone smiled because that is how art lives. Do you still want me on the Oversight Council? She asked, eyes on the street. Yes, he said. If and when you want it. She thought. I'll do a term, she said. 1 year. I'll help build the guardrails. Then I'll step off and train 2 replacements. Succession without ego, he said. Abundance as a policy, she replied. I'm stealing that phrase. You're borrowing it, she said. I charge interest. They watched a dog walk a man. The man pretended he was in charge. The dog didn't bother to disagree. A week later, a rival CEO called him to offer a stage. A glossy conference where men in expensive jackets explain cruelty with slides. He declined politely. The organizer insisted. He declined firmly. They sent a list of other speakers like a threat. He declined elegantly and suggested a 3-person panel on why innovation without consent isn't innovation. They didn't respond. He forwarded the email chain to her with one sentence. They don't want repentance on the agenda. She wrote back. Then put it on ours. They scheduled an open forum at the community center. No stage lights. No hors d'oeuvres. Coffee in paper cups that tasted nostalgic. The paralegal moderated because she had the voice of someone who refuses buzzwords and keeps time better than a metronome. A nurse, a tenant, a data scientist who had quit a job that paid him to pretend math was a mirror, 3 voices, 1 message. Make the rules boring and the ethics non-negotiable. He sat in the back. She moved between rows with a microphone like a neighbor, not a celebrity. A teenager asked a question that broke the room open. "What if power always wins?" he asked. "It doesn't," she said. "It just stays longer when we don't show up. And if we show up and nothing changes, then we show up again. That sounds exhausting." "It is," she said. "Share the work. Share the nap." The room laughed, then nodded. Laughter keeps rooms from calcifying. Nods keep policy from drying out. Later, under the tree, he asked the question that had been visiting him and leaving before he could find a plate to offer it. "Do you ever picture an ending?" he said. "Endings are for stories," she replied. "We're building the part you live in between episodes." He smiled, then sobered. "I need to tell you something." She turned her head toward him the way you turn a dial when you want to hear the song without static. "I'm stepping down as chair," he said. "From the analytics part. I'll stay as a board member, but not the top. The new charter is real. The oversight is real. The guardrails are real. I want to make sure nobody assumes this is about one man's mood. System should not require me." She watched him as if weighing the sentence in her hand. "Good," she said. He waited for more. It didn't come. He didn't push. "Say you're proud of me," he said, soft as a joke. "I'm relieved," she said. "That's better," he replied, and meant it. "If you're still with us and this story gives you a language for your own life, warm and steady, like, share it with one person who needs dignity more than pity, and make sure you're subscribed. Let bring the bill to a vote, test the guardrails in a crisis, and answer a question neither of them knew they were asking." The week before the vote felt like thunder waiting just off the shore. The air held a charge you could taste. Phones vibrated more. Doors opened quieter. People were careful with their words in a way that meant they were bracing. "If you're joining now," the narrator said, calm but urgent, "tap like and comment respect over rescue." These signals help stories like this find the people who need them. She arrived at the council building early, as always. Bus people respect clocks. She carried a folder with the bill draft, not because she needed to prove anything, but because paper makes rooms behave. He met her on the steps, no tie, sleeves rolled, a habit he no longer noticed. The paralegal flanked them like a compass that always points to action. Inside, the hallway smelled like wet coats and coffee. She recognized the councilwoman who had called their recommendations boring in the best way. The woman nodded once, brisk and human, the kind of nod that clears obstacles without theater. "We have the votes in committee," she whispered. "Final vote is still a math problem." "Math is honest," the paralegal said. "It admits when it's wrong." They took their seats. He sat behind her, 2 rows up, close enough to feel her breathing change, far enough to keep his presence useful, not heavy. The room filled with a public that looked like the city on an ordinary Tuesday. Tenants in work boots. Nurses in scrubs. Students with backpacks. Men who had learned to wear suits like they were more than fabric. Women who had taught themselves to speak and then kept going. The opposition lined the back wall with practiced patience. A hospital counsel with a haircut that expensive people use as a business card. A man from a data consortium who wore sincerity like a borrowed jacket. A lobbyist whose smile made words slippery. The proceedings began with the chair reading the bill title. A murmur traveled the room and then settled. The councilman who asked last time if she wanted damages cleared his throat. He looked at her, then didn't. Growth can be that small. Public comment, the chair announced. The first speaker was an older woman with silver hair and the posture of someone who had carried more than she should and kept one hand free for someone else. She spoke about records withheld, about moving apartments because mold makes lungs learn the word grief. She said the bill would not fix what had already happened, but it would make the next harm harder. The room listened like it had promised. The hospital council took the microphone. He praised the intent. He worried about unintended consequences. He suggested a stakeholder working group to explore a roadmap toward best practices that could be adopted in a voluntary phased manner aligned with industry standards. She raised her hand from the seats and the chair recognized her. She stood, spoke into the mic, and let each syllable find its place. Voluntary is how harm hides, she said. Phased is how it survives. Best practices are what we call rules when we're afraid to enforce them. A ripple of quiet approval moved through the rows. The counsel's jaw shifted. He adjusted his cufflinks, that small ceremony that tries to put control back on the body. The data consortium man read from a sheet. He used phrases like innovation ecosystem and differential privacy and synthetic datasets. He smiled when he said safe. She waited until he finished and lifted her own paper high enough to be seen without being dramatic. If you must use my body to prove harmlessness, it isn't harmless, she said. And if your model can't survive my refusal, it isn't a model. It's a habit with marketing. He blinked like someone who had rehearsed for a different kind of room. Then the paralegal stepped up with an example that made every abstract argument take a seat. This, she said, holding up a redacted record, is a tenant who asked for a copy of her medical chart after a gestational complication. The clinic required permission from the intended parents. The agency had dissolved. What you see blacked out is not a stranger's name. It is a person's right to their own body. This bill makes that impossible. The committee moved the bill to the floor. The councilwoman spoke one more sentence into the microphone that made civil servants in far offices sit up. We do not require miracles here. We require receipts. Applause wasn't allowed. So the room exhaled in unison, the quiet version of clapping. He leaned forward and said, just loud enough for her alone, whatever happens next, this is clean. Clean is the goal, she said. Clean leaves room for breath. They stepped into the hallway where reporters waited with recorders and patience. He turned toward the back stairwell automatically. Not this time, she said, stopping him with a look. You can stand next to the work and not steal the oxygen. Say one sentence. Then leave me too. He nodded, took the nearest mic, and delivered exactly one line. Consent isn't consent if it requires payment with your privacy. He stepped back. The reporters pivoted. She spoke her two sentences with a level voice. This bill is boring. That's why it will save you. She let the mics find someone else. By afternoon, the story had traveled. In offices with carpet that eats sound, people who rarely thought about clinics said the word dignity like it tasted new. Online, comments argued. Some asked fair questions. Some threw rocks with their names hidden behind screens. He ignored the rocks. She read the fair questions and made a list of answers in plain language that didn't scold. The vote was scheduled for Friday. On Thursday, the crisis arrived, not with sirens, but with an email that shrugged. Subject line, notice of security event. A clinic across town. Not theirs. Not anyone she had directly touched. But a clinic in the same network as the one that had once made her invisible. The body of the email had bullet points that tried to sound responsible while undermining themselves. We take your privacy seriously. Out of an abundance of caution. No evidence of misuse. The usual sentences that act like mops. Her phone lit up. 10 missed calls. She answered the paralegal first. We're on it, the paralegal said. Check your inbox. I drafted a plain English version of their notice and a checklist for affected patients. He called as her phone still buzzed, his voice steady, the kind of steady you practice, not inherit. Our benefit corporation can offer incident response. Not PR, real help. If you agree, we open the office tonight. We print the checklist. We put volunteers at tables. We teach people to freeze credit, to request records, to demand what they are owed now. Do it, she said. We don't wait for permission to put out fires. They split tasks like a drill they had rehearsed in a dream. She took the front of house. He took logistics and phones. The paralegal handled forms like a maestro. Volunteers filled the room fast, not because a call went viral, but because neighborhoods are more networked than the internet believes. The nurse who had taught privacy last week set up a corner to explain what monitoring actually means. The young doctor wrote scripts for calling agencies and clinics without getting trapped in phone tree purgatory. Her brother rolled in and stationed himself beside a folding table with extra pens and the patience of a person who has learned that patience is a skill, not a personality trait. People came with anger and with embarrassment and with that numbness that looks like calm until it cracks. A woman who worked nights and kept her hair under a scarf asked if this meant her ex could find her. A man who was saving for dentures asked if the breach would take his savings the way a landlord once took his deposit. A teenager who hadn't told their parents they were seeking care asked if their truth might arrive at home before they were ready for it. She answered what she could. When she didn't know, she said so and put a sticky note on the question like a promise. He moved through the room handing out bottled water and those prepackaged cookies that taste like they were designed for rooms like this. He did not say he was sorry. He said, here's the next step. He said, here's a form you can take to your bank. He said, do you have someone sitting with you tonight? At 9, when the crowd thinned, he stood by the copier feeding paper like a small act of faith. She walked to him, shoulders squared, eyes tired. They'll say this proves we can't legislate decency, he said softly. They'll say we overreached, she replied. That rules ruin innovation. He looked at the stack of checklists. Rules are the only thing innovation respects, he said. She put her hand over the stack like a benediction. Tomorrow, we carry both frames into the chamber. Crisis and cure. Harm and habit. And we make them choose. He nodded. His phone buzzed. A message from his general counsel at the Benefit Corp. A draft of a voluntary disclosure standard they could present alongside the bill. He read it. He didn't edit. He sent back a single line. Publish it tonight. We set the bar so high the room feels embarrassed not to reach it. If you've ever watched a community respond faster than a press release, the narrator said, measured and proud, tell us one thing you saw that worked. Your comment might be the playbook someone else needs. Friday came with sunlight like a dare. The chamber was full. The data consortium had brought more men in good suits. The hospital sent a different lawyer with a softer voice. The councilwoman wore the same no-nonsense blazer in a different color. The chair called the vote to order. Before the roll call, the councilwoman asked for 5 minutes to address the room. She used 2. In light of last night's breach, she said, glancing at her notes and then away, we have been handed a live demonstration of why voluntary standards fail. Our constituents spent their evening doing the work that institutions should have done before they asked for trust. Today's vote is not a punishment. It is a correction. She ceded the floor. The hospital's softer-voiced lawyer recommended delay. The data man suggested a new task force. The lobbyist smiled and said the council should consider the broader signal to the innovation community. The paralegal leaned forward and looked at the clock with the patience of a saint who prefers action. The roll call began. Names and ayes and nays are old theater. The third I tipped them to probable. The fifth made the room hold its breath. The eighth made someone in the back actually clap once and then clamp their hand over their mouth. The 10th I gave her a moment she would replay when the city tested her again. The bill passed. No confetti. No music. Just a shift in the floor, like the building had agreed to grow a spine. He closed his eyes for one breath, then opened them and found her. She didn't smile. She looked like a problem had been moved from one side of the ledger to the other. The paralegal squeezed her hand. Her brother texted 15 exclamation points and then, a second later, a single period. Reporters ask for quotes. She repeated her 2 sentences. This bill is boring. That's why it will save you. He stepped to a mic and delivered one. We'll match it with a voluntary disclosure standard tonight. Then we'll make voluntary contagious. They walked out into light that felt like weather and like blessing. On the steps, a man in a suit he wore like armor approached them. He introduced himself as counsel for the clinic that sent the email. He began with apology and then pivoted to explanation. He used the phrase sophisticated actor about the attacker. She stopped him without cruelty. Your email said no evidence of misuse, she said. That's not the same as proof of safety. The next time you write to a patient, imagine she's your sister and tell her what you would have done before you asked her to trust you. He swallowed. Our lawyers. Write the truth, she said, and moved past him. In the office that afternoon, they opened the doors again for anyone anxious. They gave out checklists and sat next to people who didn't want to be alone with the thought of being visible to the wrong eyes. A young mother came in with a stroller and a question that wore a brave face. If it says my data was accessed, she asked, does that mean someone can see my address? Not necessarily, the nurse said. But we act like they could. We cut off the paths that lead to you. The mother nodded. I can help on Tuesdays, she said. With printing or phones. He took down her name and folded it into the volunteer schedule like a thread. She smiled, awkward and proud, the look of someone who has decided to be part of the cure. They closed after dark. He turned off the lights and then turned them back on because he remembered a rule she had made. Leave one lamp lit in each corner so the place feels like it will be waiting when the neighborhood needs it. She locked the door. They stood on the sidewalk. The city hummed. A bus sighed to a stop like an animal catching its breath. Do you want to come by for dinner? She asked, casual, almost administrative. My brother made a goosey. It's a pan the size of an argument. I'd like that, he said. They ate at her small table with plates that didn't match. The food tasted like patience and pepper and history. Her brother told a story about a tenant who had taught him a trick for picking up a dropped card without bending all the way. He demonstrated. They applauded. The applause was absurd. It felt correct. After, her brother rolled to the window to catch a breeze that did its best. He turned back, voice light, eyes not. I need to say something, he said. I know you two don't like labels. I know you're treating this like a treaty, not a script. But I need to say what gratitude looks like, and it looks like a warning. She tilted her head. Say it. You've tied your lives to the idea that systems can be remade by ordinary people, he said. You're right. But ordinary people get tired. I don't want tired to make you cruel to each other. Her mouth opened and then closed. He swallowed a reply that would have sounded too noble and too fast. The brother continued, gentler. Make a rule. When the work takes more than it gives, you say it out loud and someone else takes a shift. That's a good rule, she said. Consider it a favor to me, he said. It's exhausting being the brother in a story. People expect me to deliver wisdom on cue. I'm out of jokes for a week. They laughed. The room softened. The warning folded itself into the house like a new beam. He washed dishes. She dried. Their shoulders touched once, accidental, precise. He didn't lean. She didn't flinch. Rests matter as much as notes. The next morning, a packet arrived from the city clerk with the stamped bill and the effective dates. She held it like a passport. He framed a copy in cheap wood and hung it in the office opposite the court decision. 2 sheets of paper that would not save the world. 2 sheets of paper that would save someone's morning. If you're still with us and this story is giving you a vocabulary for your own fight, the narrator said, warm and steady, tap like, share it with one person who needs a map, and subscribe so you don't miss the final part. The map was about to be tested again. Not by leaks or votes, but by a quieter emergency that required both their rules and their restraint. At noon, her phone buzzed with a message from a number saved as clinic director. A woman she respected. No euphemisms. No hedging. The clinic had a patient whose intended parents were refusing to authorize release of records after a complication. The new law would fix this once it took effect in 30 days. But today, the clinic's counsel was still insisting on signatures from people who had stopped picking up their phone. She didn't ask for details. She didn't need a storyboard to do the right thing. Bring her here, she said. We'll do the work the law is about to require. An hour later, a young woman stood in their front room with a posture that said she had learned to make herself small indoors. She wore a hoodie, sleeves pulled into fists, and a ring she turned in a nervous rhythm. The doctor who had become their student stood beside her looking like a man willing to be corrected in public. We can't wait 30 days, the young woman said. I have a follow-up scheduled. If they don't release my records, I could be hurt. You won't be, she said. Sit. He brought a form they had drafted the night the bill passed. A patient declaration of ownership. Plain language. 1 page. No lawyer had yet blessed it. No judge had yet quoted it. But the future law and basic decency stood behind each line like someone's parent. The young woman read. She signed. They made copies. The paralegal dialed the clinic counsel and left a message that sounded like a velvet hammer. He emailed the form to a supervisor at the hospital and CC'd a counsel inbox that had learned to elevate their notes. They waited, not passively, but with a stillness that expected the room to obey. 30 minutes later, the hospital called back. The voice on the line had learned to choose words with care. We will release the records directly to the patient now, the woman said. And we will update our protocol to reflect the law as of its effective date. Reflect it today, the paralegal said, kind but immovable. You've demonstrated it can be done. Today, the voice affirmed. The young woman exhaled like someone whose lungs had been used as storage and just got cleared out. She looked at the paper in her hands and then at them. What do I owe you? She asked. Nothing, she said. Everything, he said at the same time, then caught himself and shook his head. I mean, nothing. You owe us nothing. If you want to repay the world, teach someone else this rule. The young woman smiled a small, new smile that later would grow teeth. I can help on Saturdays, she said. He wrote it down. The room kept its habit of turning help into a schedule. That night, he walked her home through a city that had decided to be kind for a few blocks. He stopped on the sidewalk beneath the tree that had witnessed their vows without rings. He took a breath. I need to tell you something, he said. You're resigning from something else, she guessed, half joking. He shook his head. No. I am asking. He looked at his hands, at the line that curved from thumb to wrist, then back up. I'm asking if you would let this become a life. She didn't ask what he meant. The words had been walking around the room for months. They were tired. They wanted chairs. My terms, she said. Your terms, he agreed. I will not be ornament, she said. I have no use for ornaments, he replied. If we choose each other, we do not become each other's cause. We become each other's rest, he said. We tell the truth even when it makes the room small. We open a window when it does, he said. When the work takes more than it gives, we say it out loud. And I take your shift, he said. We do not make myths out of ordinary tenderness, she said. We keep it ordinary, he said. She looked at him for a long time that wasn't long at all. Then yes, she said. He didn't step forward. He waited the length of a heartbeat and then another, just long enough to make sure consent was a thing you could touch. Then he kissed her softly, like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence that promised more sentences, not an ending. Across the street, a teenager on a bike shouted, "Get it," and they laughed, which is the sound consent makes when it learns to relax. The final test came 2 days later. An email that wasn't shrugging this time. A lawsuit. A consortium of agencies and data firms arguing that the new law violated commerce, innovation, something else in Latin. Injunction requested. Expedited hearing. The kind of move power makes when it realizes it has been asked to act like it has neighbors. He read it once, then again, then handed it to her. She read it once. She didn't read it again. She put it on the table like a tool. "They want a fight in a room that smells like leather," she said. "We'll hold it in a room that smells like paper and people," he said. "We'll need affidavits," the paralegal added, already on the phone. "We'll need the doctor. The nurse. The young woman from yesterday. We'll need the hospital that bent in 30 minutes to say on the record that nothing broke when they did the right thing. We'll need you," he said to her. "You'll have me," she replied. "And you'll stand behind me, like always." "Always," he said. He looked at the clock. Then at the window. Then back at the people who had become his coordinates. "We're going to win," he said. "We're going to work," she corrected. Winning is what happens to rooms when the work is honest. "If this fight sounds familiar to your life," the narrator said, voice firm and kind, "comment with one rule you wish every system followed. Then share this with one person who's tired of being a dataset. And make sure you're subscribed." Let brings the injunction hearing, the sentence that changes a room, and a choice that turns respect into a home. The injunction hearing landed on a Monday that had the dignity to be gray. The courthouse steps held a mix of suits and sneakers. People who believed in policy brought notebooks. People who believed in spectacle brought cameras. People who believed in each other brought coffee. "If you're just joining," the narrator said, steady and warm, "tap like and comment, we do the work." These signals help thoughtful stories reach the people who need them. They entered the courtroom as a small convoy. She walked at the front with the paralegal. He followed with the doctor and the nurse. The young woman they had helped with records came too, flanked by the clinic director who had learned to call harm by its name. The consortium's side was a portrait of confidence in navy wool. Their lead counsel adjusted his glasses like a magician about to pull a rabbit from a precedent. He carried a binder the size of an apology. He set it down with ceremony. Paper can be theater when truth is short. The judge took the bench with a face that said he had no time for drama. He greeted the room in a voice that turned chatter into listening. He explained the stakes. He sketched the standard for injunctive relief like a math problem. Likelihood of success. Irreparable harm. Balance of equities. Public interest. 4 pillars. 4 ways to test whether a law gets to work while lawyers argue. The consortium went first. Their counsel praised the council's intentions. He regretted the overreach. He invoked commerce like a wounded bird. He warned of innovation chilled. He used Latin that landed like fog. He said the law compelled speech by dictating disclosures. He said it burdened trade by restricting data flows. He said it created a patchwork that would confuse compliance. He finished. He looked pleased. Fog looks like weather until it burns off. The paralegal stood. She did not carry a binder. She carried a folder with tabs and a pen that had seen more forms than dinners. She began with a sentence that made clerks lift their heads. Innovation that requires non-consensual access to the body is not innovation. It is extraction. She walked the judge through the bill with plain language. She showed how the law did not restrict care. It protected consent. She explained how records move now and how they will move under the statute. She placed the breach email into evidence without melodrama. She handed the judge the voluntary disclosure standard the benefit corporation had published. She described the 30-minute pivot at the hospital when the patient declaration and a phone call rearranged reality without injury to commerce or care. The judge listened. When judges truly listen, the room learns to breathe. The doctor testified next. He admitted his training had not prepared him to think of data as intimacy. He said the law had given him a checklist that made him safer to his patients. He spoke about informed consent like a craft. He said real consent takes time and specificity. He said rushing consent for efficiency is like skipping handwashing because the sink is crowded. The nurse testified about calls at night from people who were more afraid of exposure than of illness. She said privacy and dignity were clinical tools. She said the law had already changed conversations at the intake desk. She said staff had learned to say, "It is your body, so these are your records," and the room got quieter in a good way. The young woman approached the stand with her hoodie sleeves rolled to the wrists. A small scar peeked near a vein. She spoke without ornament. She told the court how it felt to ask for her own records and be told they were someone else's. She described the phone call that returned the records to her hands. She did not cry. She made space for the law to be heard. He watched from counsel table, not a party, not a witness. He kept his breathing even. He let her do the work. He did not try to hold the room with his face. She testified last. The paralegal asked questions with the respect of a partner. She answered in sentences exact enough to fit on paper. "What harm does the injunction risk?" the paralegal asked. "It risks teaching the city that consent waits until money is ready," she said. "What public interest does the statute serve? It keeps people from paying for care with pieces of themselves they can't get back," she said. "What happens if the law pauses? People who can least afford delay will pay for it," she said. "Is there anything else you want the court to know?" She turned to the judge like addressing one person would be enough. "We are not trying to end innovation," she said. "We are ending the habit of calling extraction by a better name. If a system needs my silence to function, it is not a system. It is a secret." The consortium's counsel rose for cross with the smoothness of a man who trusted his shoes. He asked if she hated data. She said no. She said she hated the way power uses it to make consent a toll. He asked if she was against research. She said no. She said she was against asking the vulnerable to be a control group without control. He asked if she wanted clinics to drown in paperwork. She said no. She said she wanted clinics to learn documentation that honored people instead of protecting risk. He frowned. He shuffled. He sat. Closing arguments arrived without fanfare. The paralegal framed the 4 pillars in the city's favor. Likelihood of success because the law regulates conduct, not speech. No irreparable harm to plaintiffs because compliance preserves care and profit can survive pauses. The balance of equities favors those whose bodies are at stake. Public interest lies in dignity that scales. The consortium warned the court about slippery slopes. The paralegal offered the judge a staircase. The judge took a brief recess. The room exhaled and did the dance people do when waiting. He turned to her. He leaned close enough to whisper, not to claim. "Whatever happens," he said, "you were clean." "Clean is the only win," she said. "If this moment gave you a phrase you can use in your life," the narrator said, low and clear, "comment it now. Words become tools when we share them." The judge returned. He removed his glasses. He spoke like a man who had read twice and chose his nouns carefully. "Injunctive relief is extraordinary," he began. "It stops the people's work before it starts." He summarized the 4 factors. He credited the consortium for articulating legitimate concerns about implementation. He credited the city for crafting a statute that stayed in its lane. He declined to enjoin enforcement. "Petition denied," he said. "The law will take effect on schedule." The room did not erupt. It steadied. That is what real wins feel like. The floor becomes trustworthy. Outside, microphones waited like birds that learned to eat from hands. The paralegal spoke first. She thanked the court for the clarity. She stated next steps. She named the website where people could read the plain English guide. The doctor and the nurse answered questions about process. He said one line and no more. Innovation that cannot carry dignity is not innovation. He stepped back. They walked to the community center where the sign on the door said open even when the door was closed. Inside, a group had already gathered around the cheap frame holding the court decision and the new law's text beside it. Paper on walls. 2 rulings. 2 receipts. Her brother rolled up with a grin he wore like a medal. He tapped the frame lightly. "I like this museum," he said. "It's a museum where everything on display gets used," she replied. A councilwoman arrived with a staffer carrying a box. Inside, copies of the final statute were printed on thick paper that felt like good intentions. The councilwoman handed her one and kept her voice low. "We will need help writing the clinic guidance," she said. "The kind people actually follow." "We already have drafts," she said. "We'll give you language. You can give it teeth." The councilwoman smiled the smile of a person who knows how to get things baked. "Deal," she said. They held a small gathering, not a party. Food on folding tables. People who had testified stood near people who had printed checklists. A teenager asked for a selfie with her. She declined the photo and offered a conversation. He left with a sentence he could repeat to a friend who might need it. "That is better than a picture." Later, she and he stepped into the evening. The air had spent its charge. The streetlights blinked awake and did their job without applause. They walked to the tree. They did not call it theirs. They let it be a tree. "You did it," he said. "We did the work," she said. "I want to ask you something," he said. "You already asked me the big thing," she said, smiling. "A smaller thing," he said. "Move in with me." She looked at him like a carpenter looks at a wall before deciding where to cut. She thought of her stoop and its constellations. She thought of his apartment and its quiet. She thought of her brother. She thought of rules. "My terms," she said. "Your terms," he said. "We keep this place open," she said. "The Ordinary Dignity Project stays in walking distance of the people it serves." "Of course," he said. "My brother chooses with us," she said. "He already does," he said. "We do not bring the work into our bed," she said. "We leave it on the table," he said. "Where paper belongs. We argue like we want tomorrow," she said. "We sleep like we have one," he said. "Then yes," she said. He did not lift her. He did not spin. He did not make a show out of an agreement. He touched her face with one hand and rested his forehead against hers like a person who understood proximity as a sentence, not a paragraph. They told her brother first. He rolled to the window again and let the breeze do its best. He nodded like a man who had already known and was waiting for the courtesy of hearing it said. "Good," he said. "Now write a house rule and tape it to the fridge." "What is it?" she asked. "When the work takes more than it gives," he said, smiling, "say it out loud and the other person takes the shift." She wrote it down. She used a marker that bled through. She posted it crooked. He straightened it. The line of the house adjusted with them. The next months were quiet in the way growth is. The law traveled. Clinics updated forms to say, "These are your records." Agencies rewrote contracts to reflect a world where gestational carriers could not be erased. Of course some people resisted. Of course some people tried to route around dignity like traffic. But the floor had changed. You could feel it underfoot. He transitioned from chair to board member and watched the benefit corporation stand on its own legs. He became useful in smaller rooms. He mentored engineers to write documentation that read like promises. He visited the community center on Tuesdays because that is when the teenager who needed spreadsheets came. He showed up with sleeves rolled and left without a speech. She took 1 year on the Oversight Council. She spoke rarely. When she spoke, people wrote down phrases without realizing their hands had moved. She trained 2 replacements who were better than she was at parts of the job. She stepped off on schedule. Abundance as a policy means stepping aside like a gift. The baby learned to stare at ceiling fans as if they were a sky that would not betray him. He grew into a person who ran hot and then collapsed long. He liked paper. He crinkled it with glee. He liked her. He reached for her and then for his father and then back again like affection could be shared without becoming thin. She learned to hold him in a way that did not confuse love with ownership. She kissed his hair once and whispered a promise to the world, not to the child. Protect him because he is a person. Not because he is yours. They moved in together on a Saturday that pretended to be spring. His apartment learned the sound of her laugh. Her blender learned the sound of his early morning coffee. The house rule on the fridge greeted them every morning like a teacher. When the work takes more than it gives, say it out loud. The rule saved them twice. Once when deadlines stacked and he forgot to breathe. Once when a story walked into the office that shared a shape with her past. They learned to take each other's shifts. They learned that rest, done right, is a kind of activism. They learned to leave notes for the other on the counter when words were scarce. They learned that apology delivered fast is a blessing and apology delivered slow is a lesson. People kept telling stories about him. Fewer people told stories about her, because she never chased the microphone. But if you stood on their block long enough, you would see a woman in a stitched blazer holding a door open without touching the knob. You would see a man in rolled sleeves carrying a box of paper with reverence. You would see a brother showing a kid how to fix a wheel lock with a trick that should have had a patent. You would see a community walking in and out without checking whether they belonged. One evening under the tree, they watched the street perform its nightly play. A woman laughed too loud and nobody shushed her. A man misjudged his dog's stamina and carried the animal like a sack of flour. 2 teenagers argued kindly about the best way to make a grilled cheese. The night felt like a place, not a time. I keep thinking about the first day, he said. The folder. The addendum. The word recuse. I keep thinking about the sentence, she said. What sentence, he asked, knowing. The one we taped to the fridge, she said. He smiled. The good sentences are always short. They fit on a card you can carry to court, she said. Or into a kitchen. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card he had been carrying like a talisman. It had 3 lines printed in a font that did not apologize. No data for access. Witness beats secrecy. System should feel designed for you. He handed it to her like a gift. She read it. She felt the floor shift again, just a little, in the right direction. These rules are boring, she said. That's why they'll save you, he replied. They sat in the ordinary dark a while longer. They did not plan the next fight. They did not rehearse the next speech. They did not try to memorize each other's breath. They let the night hold them. They let the neighborhood do its work. If you believe respect should be ordinary, the narrator said, gentle and firm, like this video, share it with one person who needs a map, and subscribe for more true-to-life stories. In the comments, tell us one rule you would tape to the fridge of your life. Your words might become someone else's shift. The camera drifted to the office wall. 2 frames hung side by side. A court decision that said habitability as dignity. A statute that said records belong to the body that made them. Between them, taped like a joke that turned into a doctrine, a handwritten note in marker. When the work takes more than it gives, say it out loud. The other person takes the shift. Paper on walls. People in rooms. Doors held open. Not by force. By practice. The story did not end. It learned how to live.